She was just a waitress, a quiet, unassuming girl in a bustling diner, her dreams as small and fragile as the tips she earned. He was a wealthy man, a titan of industry, his world a blur of power lunches and private jets. He saw her not as a person, but as an inconvenience, a server to be dismissed, her quiet dignity ignored. He had no idea that their paths would cross again, years later, when his empire crumbled, and his world shattered. He would come to her, a broken man, begging for her help, and what she did next would change both of their lives forever. You won't believe the chilling truth she held, and the powerful lesson they both learned about the quiet power of a single act of kindness. In the heart of Houston, Texas, a city where gleaming skyscrapers met sprawling suburbs and the rhythm of ambition pulsed through every freeway, stood the Lone Star Diner. It wasn't fancy, but it was a lifeline. Its faded red vinyl booths, the comforting clatter of ceramic mugs, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon filled the air. This was the domain of Maria Rodriguez, a young woman of 22, whose dreams were as unassuming as the chipped porcelain cups she carried. By day, she navigated the bustling tables, her hands a blur of motion, her smile a genuine, if tired, offering to every customer. By night, she studied, poring over tattered textbooks in the dim light of her shared apartment, dreaming of a future beyond the diner, a future where she could truly make a difference. She dreamed of becoming a nurse, of caring for those in need, but for now, the diner was her reality, and the meager tips her family's fragile hope. Maria's life was a testament to resilience. Her father, a proud construction worker, had suffered a debilitating injury years ago, leaving Maria, the eldest, to shoulder the family's financial burden. Her younger siblings, particularly her bright-eyed sister, Sophia, looked up to her with an innocent trust that fueled Maria's every weary step. There was no room for self-pity, only for work, for dreams deferred, for the quiet dignity of survival. She served with an almost invisible efficiency, anticipating needs, refilling coffee before it was empty, her presence a comforting, steady hum in the diner's symphony of sounds. She was a silent observer of human nature, seeing the joy in small families, the quiet despair in lonely regulars, the hurried ambition in those who barely glanced up from their phones. One sweltering afternoon, the kind of Texas heat that made the very air shimmer over the asphalt, a sleek, black, luxury car, a stark contrast to the pickup trucks and sedans that usually lined the street, pulled up to the Lone Star Diner. Out stepped Mr. Richard Sterling, a man whose name echoed through the city's business circles. At 45, he was a titan of industry, a real estate mogul whose latest high-rise gleamed like a jewel in the Houston skyline. His tailored suit, expensive watch, and an air of impatient authority practically hummed with power. His world was a blur of power lunches in air-conditioned boardrooms, private jets whisking him to New York or Miami, and deals worth millions. He saw the world in terms of acquisition and profit, people as instruments, and places like the Lone Star Diner as mere inconvenient stops on his relentless journey to more. He entered the diner, his presence a sudden, jarring silence in the otherwise lively chatter. He glanced around, his eyes skimming over the worn decor with an almost imperceptible disdain. He chose a booth by the window, not for the view, but for the isolation it offered from the common folk. Maria approached him, her notepad ready, her smile habitual. "Welcome to the Lone Star, sir. What can I get for you?" she asked, her voice soft but clear, carrying a slight, musical accent. Mr. Sterling didn't look up from his phone. He simply gestured impatiently at the menu. "Just black coffee. And quickly. I'm a busy man." His tone was dismissive, his eyes never meeting hers. He saw her not as a person, but as an inconvenience, a server to be dismissed, her quiet dignity ignored. Maria, accustomed to such treatment from the more arrogant customers, simply nodded. "Coming right up, sir." She turned to walk away, but paused when Mr. Sterling called out, "And make sure it's hot. Not lukewarm like the last time." He didn't even remember the last time, nor that he had never been there before. His words were a mere reflex, an expression of his assumed superiority. Maria returned with his coffee, perfectly brewed and steaming. She placed it carefully before him. Mr. Sterling finally looked up, not at her, but at the cup. He took a sip, then nodded curtly. "Good. Now, leave me to my work." Maria excused herself, retreating to serve other tables, the slight sting of his dismissiveness fading into the background of her busy day. He remained engrossed in his phone calls, oblivious to the world around him, to the quiet hum of human connection that filled the diner. When he finally finished, he tossed a single, crumpled dollar bill onto the table, barely enough to cover the cost of the coffee, let alone a tip. He walked out without a word, leaving behind the faint scent of expensive cologne and an almost palpable vacuum in his wake. Maria simply cleared the table, her face a mask of quiet composure. It was not the first time she had been treated this way, and she knew, with a quiet certainty, it would not be the last. Such was the nature of her job, and such was the nature of some men. Years passed. The Lone Star Diner continued its quiet, steadfast existence, a fixture in the ever-changing landscape of Houston. Maria, through sheer tenacity and countless late nights of study, had achieved her dream. She was now a respected registered nurse at a bustling community clinic, her days filled with the urgent and tender work of caring for patients. She still picked up a few shifts at the diner on weekends, a way to help her family and to stay connected to the community that had nurtured her. Her father, though still recovering, was walking again, and Sophia was excelling in her own studies, inspired by her elder sister. Maria's once fragile dreams had blossomed into a quiet, fulfilling reality. She was not wealthy, not famous, but she was content, rich in purpose and the love of her family. Meanwhile, Mr. Richard Sterling's star had continued to rise, reaching dizzying heights. His real estate empire, Sterling Holdings, had spread its concrete tendrils across not just Houston, but to Dallas and Austin, even beyond Texas. He built luxury condos, sprawling commercial parks, and exclusive gated communities. He was celebrated in the media, a poster child for entrepreneurial success in America. He acquired wealth, power, and a reputation for being utterly ruthless in business. He rarely looked back, never lingering on past interactions, always focused on the next deal, the next acquisition, the next rung on his personal ladder of success. His life was a whirlwind of international travel, high-stakes negotiations, and an ever-expanding portfolio of assets. He had forgotten the small diner, the quiet waitress, and the brief, dismissive encounter years ago. They were simply not relevant to his grand narrative. But the world, like a constantly shifting landscape, is unpredictable. The national economy took a sudden, brutal downturn. Interest rates soared, investment dried up, and the carefully constructed house of cards that was Sterling Holdings began to sway precariously. Then came the whispers, the rumors of dubious dealings, of cutting corners, of inflated valuations. A major luxury condo project in Dallas, heavily leveraged, stalled. Investors panicked. Banks called in their loans. The media, once his greatest cheerleaders, turned into a pack of wolves, tearing at his reputation. The mighty Mr. Richard Sterling, the titan of industry, found his empire crumbling around him with astonishing speed. He lost everything. His lavish mansions were repossessed, his private jet impounded. His tailored suits felt like a cruel mockery of his former glory. His once loyal employees, fearing for their own livelihoods, scattered like dust. His powerful friends, those who had once clapped him on the back and sung his praises, vanished like phantoms in the night. He was left with nothing but his name, now synonymous with failure, and a mountain of debt. The man who had once commanded respect and fear now commanded only pity, or worse, scorn. He found himself ostracized, his calls unanswered, his pleas for help falling on deaf ears. The world that had once worshipped his success now reveled in his downfall. He was, to the casual observer, a ghost, a phantom, a person who existed only in the quiet of his own despair. Desperate, with his last few crumpled dollars clutched in his hand, Mr. Sterling found himself wandering the familiar, yet now alien, streets of Houston. His expensive shoes, once a symbol of his power, now felt heavy, weighted with the burden of his failure. He hadn't eaten properly in days, his stomach a hollow echo of hunger. He needed to make a call, to try one last desperate plea to an old contact, but his phone, once a conduit to global markets, was dead. He saw a small, familiar sign in the distance, a faded neon glow in the encroaching twilight. The Lone Star Diner. It was a place he hadn't thought about in years, a place he had dismissed as insignificant. But it was open, and it had a public phone. He walked in, his once proud shoulders slumped, his tailored suit rumpled and worn. The aroma of coffee and bacon, once a mere background scent, now assaulted his senses with a painful reminder of his hunger. The familiar clatter of plates, once an irritant, now sounded like the distant clang of a forgotten life. He felt a profound sense of shame, a shame that was far worse than any financial loss. He, Mr. Richard Sterling, was now begging for a phone call, for a chance to salvage even a shred of his former life. Maria, now teaching full-time, was covering a weekend shift because one of the younger waitresses was ill. She was wiping down a table, her movements still efficient, still imbued with that quiet dignity, when she saw him. He was sitting in a booth by the window, the same booth he had occupied years ago, but he was a different man. His face, once arrogant and assured, was now drawn and gaunt, etched with lines of despair. His eyes, once dismissive, now held a haunted, almost pleading look. He looked up as she approached, and their eyes met. A flicker of recognition, faint as a dying ember, passed between them. He clearly didn't recognize her, not fully, not beyond the generic image of a waitress. But she remembered him. Oh, she remembered him. The dismissive tone, the crumpled dollar, the arrogant disdain. She remembered it all. "Welcome to the Lone Star, sir," Maria said, her voice calm, professional, betraying no hint of recognition. "What can I get for you?" Mr. Sterling cleared his throat, his voice raspy with disuse and hunger. Just a glass of water, please. And, is there a phone I could use? Mine's dead." His words were hesitant, almost apologetic, a stark contrast to his past imperiousness. He was a broken man, and she was a waitress, a ghost in his forgotten past, a person who held his last desperate hope. Maria simply nodded. "Of course, sir. The phone is by the counter. I'll get you some water." She brought him a glass of water, cool and refreshing. He gulped it down, then gestured at the menu. "And, do you have anything simple? Something inexpensive?" His pride was still there, but it was a wounded, bleeding thing. Maria's heart, a wellspring of quiet compassion, felt a pang. She remembered his past cruelty, but she saw only the broken man before her. She saw not a titan of industry, but a human being in pain, a man who was lost, who was weary, who was hungry. She saw a reflection of her own past struggles, her own moments of quiet desperation. She looked at him, and she knew, with a chilling certainty, that she had to do something. She remembered the contempt in his eyes, the casual dismissal, but she also remembered her father's words, "Kindness is a mirror, Maria. What you give, you receive." "Sir," she said, her voice soft but firm. "It's on me. What would you like? A plate of our special chicken fried steak? Or perhaps a hot, fresh chili con carne with cornbread?" She offered him not just food, but dignity, a lifeline in a sea of despair. Mr. Sterling looked up, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock, disbelief, and a profound, aching despair. He looked at Maria, at the quiet, unassuming waitress who was offering him a meal, a gesture of kindness he did not deserve, a gesture he had never offered to anyone in his own life. He looked at her, and he saw not a person, but an angel. He saw not a waitress, but a healer. He saw not a woman who was an inconvenience, but a woman with a kind, unyielding heart. He looked at her, and he knew, with a profound, aching despair, that he had been utterly, completely, wrong. He ate with a quiet, unyielding dignity, a dignity that was far more powerful than any accolades or trophies. He ate as if he were eating for two, as if he were eating for the ghost he had once been. He ate as if he were eating for a life he had once had, a life that was now gone. He ate, and he was a man who was full, a man who was a hero, a man who was alive. Maria, with her usual quiet, unyielding dignity, simply watched him. She watched him with a profound, aching sense of joy, a joy that words could never express. She was a woman who was empty, but who was a hero. She was a woman who was a ghost, a phantom, a person who was slowly, silently, fading. But she was a woman who was alive. After he had eaten, his hunger sated, his spirit lifted by the warmth of the food and the unexpected kindness, Mr. Sterling finally looked at Maria, his eyes filled with a mixture of awe and gratitude. He recognized her then, truly recognized her. The quiet dignity, the gentle smile, the unwavering kindness. You're Maria, aren't you?" he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "From years ago. I remember now." His face flushed with a deep, aching shame. "I treated you terribly. I was arrogant. I was dismissive. I was a fool." Maria simply smiled, a small, gentle smile that reached her eyes. "We all have our moments, sir," she said softly. "It's how we learn from them that matters." Mr. Sterling's eyes welled up with tears. He, the man who had once commanded an empire, was now begging for forgiveness from a waitress he had once scorned. "I lost everything, Maria," he confessed, his voice a raw, desperate gasp. "My company, my reputation, my friends, everything. I don't know what to do. I have nothing left." He looked at her, his eyes filled with a profound, unyielding sense of despair. He saw not a person, but an angel. He saw not a waitress, but a healer. He saw not a woman who was an inconvenience, but a woman with a kind, unyielding heart. He looked at her, and he knew, with a chilling certainty, that he had been utterly, completely, wrong. Maria listened, her heart aching with a profound, unyielding compassion. She remembered her own struggles, her own moments of quiet desperation. She remembered the countless times she had been dismissed, ignored, treated as less than. But she also remembered the kindness of strangers, the small acts of generosity that had kept her going. She remembered her father's words, "True wealth is not in what you own, but in who you are, Maria. In how you treat others." She took a deep breath. "Mr. Sterling," she began, her voice steady and clear. "You built an empire once. You have vision, you have drive. You made mistakes, yes, but those don't erase your strengths. The market is down, but it will rise again. What you need now is not just money, but trust. And a fresh perspective. He looked at her, confused. But I have nothing. No one will trust me. Maria nodded. Perhaps. But Houston is a community. We remember those who helped us, and those who hurt us. But we also believe in second chances. You need to start small. Rebuild trust, one brick at a time. Not with grand projects, but with something real, something rooted in this community. She then began to outline a plan, a small, unassuming idea that had been brewing in her mind for years, a dream that she had kept hidden. My family owns a small plot of land outside the city, she explained. My father, when he was well, always dreamed of building affordable housing for people like us, for families who struggle to pay rent in the city. Small, simple homes. Nothing grand. Just honest, decent places to live. Mr. Sterling listened, his eyes widening with each word. But, without capital, without a reputation. You have a vision, Maria interrupted gently. And you have experience. And I have connections in the community. People who are tired of waiting for grand promises, who just want a safe, affordable place to call home. People who might be willing to invest small amounts, to contribute labor. A community project. Not Sterling Holdings, but Houston Builds. A project built on trust, on fairness, on genuine need. He looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time. Not as a waitress, not as an inconvenience, but as a woman of incredible insight, resilience, and quiet power. He saw her wisdom, her connection to the heart of the city, the very fabric of the community he had once disdained. He saw that her dreams, once so small and fragile, were now more profound, more sustainable, than any of his sprawling, empty high-rises. He saw the potential, not for personal gain, but for genuine impact. Mr. Sterling, a man who had never accepted a handout in his life, was humbled. He looked at Maria, the woman he had once ignored, the woman who was now offering him a path to redemption, a lifeline in a sea of despair. He saw not a person, but an angel. He saw not a waitress, but a leader. He saw not a woman who was an inconvenience, but a woman with a kind, unyielding heart and a profound understanding of human nature. He accepted her offer. He had found his redemption, not in a new deal, not in a new acquisition, but in the quiet, profound act of listening, of humility, of genuine connection. He had learned that true dignity was not in a title, but in a kind heart. He had learned that true wealth was not in money, but in the love you gave, and the lives you touched. He had walked into the diner as a loser, and he had walked out as a man with a purpose, a man with a second chance. Together, they started Houston Builds. It was a slow, arduous process, filled with setbacks and challenges. Mr. Sterling, stripped of his arrogance, worked tirelessly, his hands getting dirty, his mind focused not on personal profit, but on the needs of the community. He learned to listen, to collaborate, to value the contributions of every single person, from the laborers to the local suppliers. Maria, with her quiet strength and deep community roots, navigated the complexities, rallied support, and kept the project grounded in its mission. The first few homes were modest, but they were built with care, with integrity, with the collective effort of a community that believed in itself. When the first family, a young couple with 2 children, received the keys to their new, affordable home, Mr. Sterling saw the tears in their eyes, the profound relief on their faces. It was a feeling far more satisfying than any multi-million-dollar deal he had ever closed. He had lost his empire, but he had gained something far more valuable, his humanity. He had been broken, but he had been remade. He had lost his past, but he had gained something far more valuable, a future, built not on concrete and greed, but on compassion and community. And Maria, the quiet waitress who had dared to dream, watched with a gentle smile, knowing that her small act of kindness had not only changed a man, but had begun to change her world, one home, one family, one act of genuine human connection at a time. This story is a powerful reminder that you never know who you are talking to. It's a reminder that a single act of cruelty can come back to haunt you in the most unexpected ways. It's a reminder that true strength is not in a title, but in a kind heart. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to be reminded of the power of empathy. Like and subscribe for more stories that will change your perspective and remind you that sometimes, the most valuable lessons are the ones that are learned over a simple cup of coffee in a quiet diner.